Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos The Brief. It's our weekly show about politics. I'm Marcos Moses. I'm here with Carrie Eleveld, and today we are going to be talking a couple things. We're going to be talking about Joe Biden's State of the Union address. That took place after last week's episode, and we're also going to be talking about Republican dysfunction in Congress, which is absolutely delicious and a lot of fun. And I don't think it's serving them well right now. So we're going to talk about those things. We also want to talk about the Republican presidential campaign, but we may have to save that for next week because there's so much to talk about, all these topics. I don't think we can cram them into a single episode, but we'll see. We'll see. So, Carrie, we had Sarah Longwell on last week. She is now an independent, we found out. She used to be a Republican, a never Trumper, and she does focus groups. And so we asked her, I think you asked her, what Joe Biden needed to do to have a successful State of the Union address.
Right.
And her response was that it was less about message and more about proving that the optics of it. And maybe you remind me exactly how she framed it, but it was sort of like, can he prove that he's got it?
She was much more blunt than that. She was like, I can't remember exactly, but it was close to something like this. It doesn't matter a bit what he says. It's just whether or not he looks good. which, honest to God, I was like, oh my God, really? Stop. Democrats were like, but it's all about message, which I do think matters a little bit. But she was like, there's so many people believe, in focus groups she does and in polling that he doesn't have what it takes. He does, he's too old. He's a little bit doddering, whatever it is. And she was just saying, look, the only thing that really matters tomorrow night is that he looks sharp. And I'm here to tell you, he looked pretty damn sharp. So that was good.
Yeah, I mean, your headline was, I forget the exact headline, but you wrote it up, and your headline was like he nailed it, right?
It was a thing of beauty. It was a thing of beauty. I mean, and so I've listened. Obviously, we're a week out now. People are going to have heard a lot about the State of the Union, or if we're obviously the only place that you get any of your news, which I fully encourage, then we'll go ahead and say like that. He did a real economic rundown of his, important wins so far that most people don't know about, generating 12 million jobs in 2 years, more than any other president has created in 4 years, hitting a 50-year unemployment low. He touted signing more than 300 bipartisan laws, which, honest to God, I was shocked at. Adding
some of them are post offices, to be fair, but
okay. Yeah, that's fair. But he's making that play, adding 800. I mean, he did sign some consequential bipartisan laws, in particular the CHIPS Act and the infrastructure law. So both of which are important and big ticket items. So, manufacturing jobs, the fastest growth in 40 years, securing, a record 10 million applications from people to start new businesses. I mean, I think polling shows that people really don't know that these good things have happened. They don't even, some people, I mean, there was almost like, in polling in Navigator Research, which is a progressive consortium of pollsters, there was almost an even split of like a third of people who thought we lost more jobs than we created last year, which absolutely isn't true. It's not even close. And a third of people who said we created more than we lost. So like they were competing, and then everybody else was like, I'm not sure. So many people just really didn't know about that. But then he did this kind of amazing thing, and I'm not going to linger on it too long, but he backed Republicans into a corner on Social Security and Medicare because they keep talking about wanting to cut it. It's kind of not there. Yeah.
Let me just interrupt you right there because I want to set the stage a little bit more, because this actually, there's a substance component for sure, and I know you're going to talk about that, and I want to make sure that because it's important, because we're Democrats, we care about policy. But I think this is what spoke to Sarah Longwell's point more than anything. So this is where the idea of how he presented himself, and did he have the vitality and sharpness to prove that he still could be president, and given that he's going to run again, that's going to be critical, and also negate the right-wing frame that he's an old, doddering, senile fool, weekend at Bernie's, he's being propped up. I mean, these are things that Republicans say, right? So this is the moment where both policy and optics sort of like combine. And so go ahead.
Yeah, and to be clear, this is almost surely, other than Trump perhaps staging another insurrection, is almost surely going to be the most watched political event of the year, right? I think 27 million viewers. In terms of a political event, it gets by far more viewership than any other political event of the year. So he essentially backs Republicans into a corner on Social Security and Medicare cuts, which they keep talking about. It's not really their official position, but top Republicans are pushing it. Rick Scott, we've talked about this before, who ran the Senate campaign to retake the majority and wasn't
Florida
successful.
Senator.
Florida senator, had an 11-point plan that he released that wanted to sunset all federal legislation every 5 years. That includes, very importantly, Medicare and Social Security. So if you can't get enough votes to renew it, then it just goes by the wayside. I mean, that's just frightening. And then
remember how hard it is to pass something. You got the filibuster, you have all sorts of legislative shenanigans. It would be a challenge.
You want to look at a piece of legislation when Clinton passed the assault weapons ban, and I think it was sunsetted in 10 years, right? They passed it in 1996, I think, mid 90s, and then the idea was surely this will get renewed. Well, guess what? It didn't get renewed, and now look at what we got. So, I think about that and the inanity of that. And it was kind of like, well, instead we'll just have a sunset provision on it. And then obviously it will get renewed. No, it did not get reviewed. And now we have renewed. And now we've got a mass shooting, usually done by a mass, an assault weapon, AK-47 style or AR-15 style, once every frickin' 2 weeks. So anyway, don't get me started on that. So yeah, so he says he points out that there's a lot of Republicans talking about Social Security, cutting Social Security and Medicare. He said it's some Republicans, it's not all Republicans. And then there's this he goads them into this huge sort of, what are you talking about? Because it's so insanely unpopular. I mean, this is critical money every month for tons of seniors across the country. They literally couldn't make ends meet. They don't know where they would actually get grocery money. They wouldn't get health care. I mean, it's just unbelievable to even talk about it. And they're all feigning ignorance about this.
Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
You're a liar.
Memed herself.
Yeah, you're a liar.
With her Cruella DeVille puppet jacket.
Oh, Marcos, I missed an opportunity to have a white, fuzzy thing around my neck now. Anyway,
then people would wonder how many puppies you killed, and we don't want that kind of questions. No.
So anyway, as Republicans are protesting this and, saying, well, this absolutely isn't true, chief among them, Rick Scott and Mike Lee, who literally pledged, there's video of him saying in 2010 when he was running for Senate, the first thing I'm going to go after is, Social Security. I mean, all these people, Ron Johnson, who continually calls it a Ponzi scheme. This morning, this is the
Tuesday morning.
Tuesday morning, his Valentine's Day message to America was that it was a Ponzi scheme, Social Security, and obviously he wants to reform it so it's not a reform,
quote unquote, yeah, scare quotes.
So that he doesn't want, so it's not a Ponzi scheme. But anyway, they're all protesting, and then Biden says, okay, I mean, he's unilaterally disarms them by saying, okay, then it sounds like we agree. He literally quips no, really, conversion, I like conversion is what he says.
It's unanimous.
It's unanimous. Then we agree. He literally is saying, then we agree in front of the entire 27 million audience, not to mention, whatever digital viewers there were on top of that. Then we're all not going to cut Social Security. That's off the table, right? And he gets them to agree verbally on the floor in front of the biggest political audience of the year that they are not going to cut Social Security and Medicare in order to and as leverage points to increase the debt ceiling. It was masterful.
It was, and it wasn't, again, the policy stuff, the maneuvering, but the quickness, the wit, the ability to take this like mass Republican feigned outrage and just jujitsu it on their face, right? And just slam them on their ass. It was anybody that thinks that Joe Biden is too slow or too sleepy, or that moment right there, I'm not sure how many other politicians would have pulled that off.
No, I don't know how. And he did it. He's always the happy warrior. He did it so well because he wasn't like, you guys suck. You know what I mean? He was like, it's just some of you. And here's how Kate.
Oh, he was joyful. He was having fun.
He was joyful. He was really enjoying it. At some point, he said, well, if you don't believe me, and he leaned in, he was on the dais and he leaned into the lectern and into the microphone. He says, anyone who doubts it can contact my office and I'll send you the plan. And of course, he was talking about Rick Scott's 11-point plan. But then, of course, the next day or the day after that, the White House literally has a point by point of all of the people and Republican lawmakers and groups that have endorsed either reforms, cuts, raising the age of eligibility, all these different things. And it's a lot of them. It's not just a few. I mean, it's influential people. And so
Carrie,
can I just wait? Let me just say, he refuses.
I just didn't want you to move on before, like, I want
to. Oh, no, I'm not moving on yet. Well, I am moving on in the sense that he refuses to say during the speech to name names, right? He doesn't name Rick Scott. He just says some Republicans. He doesn't name Mike Lee. He doesn't name Ron Johnson. Then the next day he goes to Wisconsin to tout, one of his economic pillars, and then he goes down to Florida to talk specifically about Social Security and Medicare. And in both of those places, he goes ahead and drops Ron Johnson wants this, and in Florida, he goes to Ron Johnson was just reelected last cycle, but Rick Scott is going to be up in 2024, and he goes to his home state and says, Rick Scott has the plan. He's the one who devised the plan to get rid of Social Security. And then the White House is leaving these pamphlets on the seat of everybody in that venue in Florida of Rick Scott's plan that literally like lays out, we're going to cut it. So, I mean, that's what Rick Scott was saying. So it was just it was masterfully done in the moment. And then there was also sort of masterful follow-up on it that has kept the conversation rolling for a solid week now. It's still being talked about. So definitely want to go there, because even Mitch McConnell took some punches at Rick Scott, which was pretty freaking hilarious. I definitely want to talk about how this setup actually has exacerbated the Republican dysfunction in Congress. But before I do that, my sort of meta take on the State of the Union address was that traditionally it's a boring freaking speech. Like, I'm not a fan of the State of the Union address. Like, it's a lot of eye rolling. It's just like, okay, this is stupid, and a lot of boring showmanship. And yeah, people watch it because it's the State of the Union address, but it never really historically has really never done anything for me. And what really struck me about this one is that, yeah, Biden was a little nervous at the beginning. His stuttering sort of came out a little bit. So, but then he warmed up. And he treated this differently, I think, than most former presidents have. Most former presidents treat it as like this really serious, gravely important speech, as opposed to sort of a political speech. It's a different. Look at Prime Minister question time in the United Kingdom, right? Where it's just like this frolicking jousting. And Biden went in there and treated it like Prime Minister question time. Like, he went in there basically to have fun. And it was a political speech for sure. I mean, this is politics, but he wasn't overtly partisan. So he somehow managed to make it incredibly political without incredibly partisan.
and it made Republicans and sort of their crazy wing, which is incredibly maliciously partisan, made them look even worse. And then you have Sarah Huckabee Sanders come in, governor of Arkansas, doing the rebuttal speech, which is never a good place to be. Like, I don't know why anybody wants to do that, because nobody has ever looked good doing the rebuttal speech. And she came in talking about how crazy and the difference between Republicans and Democrats are that one party's crazy, right? And no sense of like self-awareness, because you may think that, but Americans don't think that. And she was throwing out words like CRT without explaining what it was, and woke culture without explaining what it was. It was not a speech to try to win votes, because that's what's happened to the Republican, MAGA right. They've given up trying to appeal to the broader American public. Joe Biden was firmly rooted in mass appeal. It was if you're looking at if that's a campaign he's running, it's actually really good. And generally speaking, Carrie, this, Daily Kos in general, we've always bristled at bipartisan talk because it's always been sort of fake and BSy, and it cedes ground to the Republicans when they never return that favor, right? In this case, the way he framed it did not offend me. I mean, it was that good where like me, the partisan warrior who's like, screw bipartisanship, right? I was like, no, this is actually really freaking good. And then you contrast that with Sarah Huckabee Sanders and with Marjorie Taylor Greene and basically the whole Republican Party. And it really made Biden look like not just the adult in the room, but like the fun uncle in the room. Like, okay, yeah, I actually really do want to hang out with this guy. He's all there. He's freaking hilarious. He's sharp. He's funny. He's smart. Let me hang out with that guy, not Marjorie Taylor Greene, please.
I had to laugh. They were like, there was this idea that they were going to put Sarah Huckabee Sanders out there because I think she's 40 years old. She's like the youngest, person to ever serve as Arkansas's governor or whatever. And, they put her out there like she was going to appeal to young people. Okay, the crazy young people. The other people are like, let's go have a beer with Uncle Joe. You know what I mean?
Like the old guy was much more appealing to young people.
Totally. And so I mean, they really did us a favor there. But let's just also admit though that the electoral incentives have changed around never giving an inch to Republicans, never talking about bipartisanship. I just want to be clear that we are sort of living in a new dynamic. For a long time, it's only about the base. It's only about turning out the base. And now what we're finding is that this, we found this in 2020 and we found it again in 2022. There is this I don't know, 3%, maybe 5% sliver of people who are actually sort of swing voters. They might even lean conservative, but they don't want to vote for the anti-MAGA majority. And in order to win the anti-MAGA majority, the pro-democratic anti-MAGA majority, I do think there have to be some sort of nods to bipartisanship. I also want to be clear. Democrats are winning on all the social issues, abortion, even gun safety, which is more controversial, but winning majorities on that. They're winning, they're winning on LGBTQ issues. They're basically winning on all the social issues. So in order to be bipartisan anymore, you don't have to give up on the social issues that Clinton gave way to, right?
Mm-hmm.
When he was president. It doesn't mean that you have to soft pedal these, supposedly divisive social issues. They're not divisive anymore. They are pro-democratic, these social issues. So where you're looking to forge bipartisanship is really on the points of, we're not crazy.
Yeah.
We're not going to blow up the economy, and BT dubs, we are better on the economy than Republicans are. And I want to say a point about that, because I have heard some criticism of Biden's speech. There wasn't, I can't remember the exact amount of time, but he didn't spend more than a minute on abortion. There was a few things that, he said, I think he gave one nod to sort of LGBTQ trans issues. I think some progressives wanted him to spend more time on this. And I just want to say he and Democrats ran very hard on that in the midterms. I am certain They will run hard on it again, at least on abortion for sure. And they should be running on trans issues too, because let me just tell you, starting with former Republican Governor Pat McCrory in North Carolina, if you're supporting the bathroom bills, the anti-trans bathroom bills, and all of that stuff, it's a loser every year for Republicans when they go after that crap in the general election. So, but anyway, oh, I got off on a tangent. They will run on that. They will run on the social issues when we get as time moves on. I think what the White House was trying to do was early on start to course correct something that has gone on for decades, which is this unwarranted perception, this false perception that Republicans are better on the economy. I think they devoted the bulk of their speech to making sure that no one who sort of, because the people who are tuning in, Republicans aren't tuning in. It's Democratic curious, Democratic leaning, and hardcore Democrats who are watching this speech end to end. And they need to be reminded, and they need to be told, and they need to be, have the courage of their convictions about the fact that Democrats are really better for the economy. What Joe Biden and his administration have managed to do for the economy, along with the Democratic Congress when we were in control, is boost this economy better than any other economy in the world right now post-pandemic. So that I think that's why they devoted so much time to that and didn't spend a lot of time on the social issues. I don't think they're running away from them, particularly abortion. They will get back into that. They just are trying to set the record straight on probably the biggest issue if we want to win swing and independent voters in 2020 in 2024.
Yeah, no, the issue, I mean, there's no need to talk about the thing everybody knows we stand for already. Like, everybody knows the Democrats are for, equality, whether it's gender, sex equality, that we're, for full access to abortion rights. Like, it wasn't that the focus, you're right. The focus was, these are the things that people don't really get about us or refuse to get about us. And one of the reasons that we aren't doing better electorally, because people still think that Republicans are better on the economy. I mean, that's a weird, like, Wall Street is better for the economy than the prescriptions that Democrats have, even though just historically, look at the data, the economy always does better under Democrats. Always. So one of the things that really struck me, though, it's been a week now, Carrie, and they're still like stepping it on Social Security. Like, it was so damaging that they keep needing to rehash it and bring it up again to try to keep saying, no. That tells me that it struck blood.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I almost wish that we had that CNN clip. It's much too long, but that CNN clip of Rick Scott going on and debating this CNN anchor who's a reporter too. I think it was Caitlin Collins.
It was.
About whether or not he actually wanted to cut Social Security, and he was trying to get her in a gotcha moment, saying, well, Jake Tapper says something differently than you say it. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I don't even know how he became governor of Florida. He is the worst. He's the worst messenger. He kept on saying, but Jake Tapper said, and I'm thinking,
yeah, and Caitlin's like, Rick, Jake Tapper never said that.
Rick, I know. And Caitlin Collins finally had to say something along the lines of, basically, I don't care what Jake Tapper said. I'm having an interview with you right now. And what I'm telling you is that cutting the costs of benefits for Social Security, which is what Democrats have done, is very different. I mean, she didn't say that, but I'm saying that is what Democrats have done is very different from cutting benefits, right? Yeah. Cutting the costs of benefits is actually a cost savings, not necessarily a cut in benefits.
Yeah, I mean, what Democrats did, just really quickly, because it actually matters and it shows that Democrats do shit, is that they instead of letting Big Pharma basically gouge Medicare by charging too much for drugs, capped what they would charge what they would pay for those drugs. So yeah, less money is being spent, but that's not a cut in Medicare and Medicaid. That is a cut in the profits of big pharma that was gouging the American taxpayer. Those are good things, but in the Republicans' mind, apparently, cutting benefits is good. Cutting big pharma's profits off the American taxpayer is bad. And this is
right. And what they want to say is if the federal government is spending less money on it, then it's a cut to benefits. It's actually an increase in benefits because of the cost savings, just to be clear. And Republicans are going to try to go down that avenue. But then you have Rick Scott with this disastrous interview on CNN. Like I said, Ron Johnson just can't quit talking about it being a Ponzi scheme. But you had this beautiful moment where Biden goes down to Florida to talk about Social Security and Medicare. He totally dings Rick Scott on this. He says the very idea that the senator from Florida wants to put Social Security and Medicare on the chopping block every 5 years, I find to be somewhat outrageous. So outrageous that you might not even believe it. That's what Biden says. Well, then Mitch McConnell, who obviously is Republican, right? Republican. And, he and Rick Scott, there's no love lost between them. They've been trading barbs, right, for a long time. And Rick Scott challenged him as minority leader and lost pretty handily. I think 10 votes to 40 or something. But Mitch McConnell is got to want that seat, right? Because he wants to take the majority back in 2024. And he says, I think he just muses, he sort of ponders what this might mean for Rick Scott's reelection. I think it will be a challenge for him to deal with this in his own reelection in Florida, McConnell says, a state with more elderly people than any other state in America. I mean, that is Mitch McConnell actually just shivving Rick Scott in his reelection campaign. And what is crazy about it is I just want you to imagine for a second that Majority Leader Chuck Schumer would, ponder whether or not one of John Tester's, Democratic senator in a state that's going to be tough for him to win reelection. Can you imagine Chuck Schumer saying something like, I don't know if Tester's, view on that is going to go over well with his own voters in Montana. I mean, I just can't imagine that, right? You can't imagine that Chuck Schumer would shiv his own, senator. And that's exactly what McConnell did.
Yeah, and it's so bad. It's literally he needs that seat. He needs that seat absolutely to get the majority, and he just undermined it. He happily undermined it. He just didn't give enough. And it's particularly noteworthy because it's a bleak map for the Democrats. We don't have any real pickup opportunities. Our two best pickup opportunities are Florida with Rick Scott and Ted Cruz in Texas. And those are not great pickup opportunities. So for him to undermine one of our very few chances at anything in a state that is trending away from the Democrats is absolutely, I don't know, it's hysterical, it's funny, it was the best. I couldn't believe it. I was I thought I read it wrong when I first read it.
The more I thought about it, the more I was like, wow, that is really something right there. But this is just the amount of, McConnell's got a lot to say. McConnell's also trying to manage his counterparts in the House, right? Yeah. And he has been saying things like, he's been trying to sort of insulate his caucus from his own Senate caucus from what the House is doing, because he knows that Kevin McCarthy has zero power there. And he's not going to say that publicly, but he knows that Kevin McCarthy and Kevin McCarthy just really isn't the sharpest tool in the shed, right? So he in order to win that, he gave away win the seat or the speakership, he gave away all his power. And Mitch McConnell is on the one hand trying to get House Republicans to see the light on not blowing up the economy on the debt ceiling. I mean, just today, Mitch McConnell I'm just see if I can find this. This is Mitch McConnell talking about, McCarthy, and he's kind of trying to send orders to McCarthy through the press, over the transom. Someone asked him about McCarthy, and McConnell says, well, I wish him well, but I think the American people need to know there's not going to be a default. Not going to be a default. He repeats it twice. I mean, it's kind of like, listen up, McCarthy. I'm just telling you, there's not going to be a default. And of course, now McCarthy's going to be in a bad place because Joe Biden got him to, got the Republicans to, pledge basically publicly that they weren't going to cut Social Security and Medicare. Those are exactly the cuts that McCarthy and the sort of maniacs in the House GOP, they wanted to use not really raising the debt ceiling as a leverage point in order to get those cuts. So he's, now there's going to be a big fight.
They're not going to touch defense. They're not going to touch
They're not
the
going to
Pentagon's
touch
budget.
defense.
And if you don't touch the Pentagon's budget, which is $800+ billion, almost $1 trillion, annual defense budget, you don't touch that. You don't touch Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. There's not a lot left at that point, and you're not going to balance the deficit by cutting. You really want to balance that deficit. You get rid of the tax cuts for the millionaires and billionaires. You do things to raise revenue. You do not cut your way. There's not that much to cut. Just the math isn't there. It's just brutal math. Yeah. And so Joe Biden today, again, Valentine's Day, Tuesday, he's like, you know what? Instead of threatening each other, why don't we just lay our budgets out? Knowing darn well that there's no math that'll work, right? So it's just saying, like, show me your math. And instead of this rhetoric, which is all we've heard so far from the nihilist Freedom Caucus.
And McCarthy can't come up with a budget that's going to work. There's no way. He can't even get his Republican caucus to agree on one. So what they want to do is get the White House to put out a budget, and then they're just going to, poke holes in it. Oh, well, we should cut here and we should cut there and we should, you know what I mean? Just like, and then they'll just down it and blame it on the White House, right? But Biden is challenging them. Okay, well, if you want cuts, let's not talk about the debt ceiling. That's off the table. We're just, we're going to raise the debt ceiling. Let's talk. You show me what your budget is, and then we'll talk about it.
And McConnell is Biden's ally.
Yes, and McConnell is Biden's ally. Honest to God, I don't know what is happening. But twice in the past week, McConnell and Biden tag team to go after Rick Scott, and now McConnell and Biden are tag teaming to try to save the global community from the economic meltdown that House Republicans are, have been jonesing for. So it's bizarro world, I mean, think about the McConnell was the guy in 2010 after the midterms or before the midterms in 2009, excuse me. McConnell was the guy after President Barack Obama's, election, winning the presidency, who took his caucus into a room behind closed doors and said, we're not going to do anything with this president. We're going to make him a one-term president. Now, he didn't succeed at that, but he did succeed in gumming up the works and thing after thing after thing. He did deny him a Supreme Court seat. He did shoot down, piece of legislation after piece of legislation. He didn't give an inch on the healthcare bill, on the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. And so Democrats ended up having to pass it, just by the hair of their chinny chin with all Democratic votes. So not a single Republican took part of that. This is who Mitch McConnell fashioned this whole idea of we're not going to work with the Democrats on anything. And now, we were talking earlier, you and I, about how there's different electoral incentives now. And McConnell realizes that too. There's different electoral incentives. The Republican Party can no longer win tough races in battleground states statewide, right? I'm not saying they can't win districts, but they can't win tough races in battleground states, in statewide races, if they don't get some of the suburban vote back that has moved towards Democrats because Republicans are acting so crazy. He gets that. And so now he is much more, first of all, he's the least like, even more than Kirsten Sinema, he is the least like politician in America. Democrats hate him. Republicans do not like him. The MAGA base thinks he's a traitor. Okay. Nobody likes him, but he knows that the only way that his people can win any contested races is for them to have, is for them to not appear as crazy as the House Republicans are.
Yeah. No, it's it's pretty
so
awesome.
Thus
so weird.
Thus, the Biden, McConnell compact to go after Rick Scott and talk House Republicans down from blowing up the economy over the debt ceiling. I mean,
it really shows. I mean, ultimately, I think that's just a sign of just how off the rails the Republican Party really is. Where even McConnell, who was the devil and who created much of the dysfunction, and like you said, the culture of non-bipartisanship, like unipartisanship, that even he's saying, like, I don't want any more. I don't want a part of this, and this is destroying our country, and we can't go down this route. So things have changed. The climate has changed. Democrats are on the attack. They seem to be having fun, which is, I think, really reflected in people's reaction to it.
They're bold. I mean, Democrats have the sense that they have the upper hand now, and they should. Listen, all of our readers are constantly like, we can't get too confident. Okay, well, Democrats haven't been too confident in, I don't know, since we were born.
FDR,
since we were born,
FDR,
right?
I'm sure FDR.
Yeah, FDR had swagger, but since then, since FDR, we haven't really had a lot of swagger.
It's like 90 years, a little rough 90 years.
We've been missing some swagger. Anyway, now that we got 80-year-old Joe Biden in the White House, we've got swagger back. No, but for reals, I do think I am not worried about us getting overconfident. Okay. I'm worried about us having been underconfident for the past, 2 decades. And there's this constant thing of, oh, well, Democrats are terrible at messaging. Well, you know what? Democrats keep winning the presidency. Democrats keep winning the popular vote for, I don't know, 6 of the last 7 presidential elections or something like that. Democrats have, if you go back, and I should have these actual figures, and I don't totally have them in the head, but a point that Simon Rosenberg keeps making is, if you look at the battleground states of, Arizona, Nevada, I'm trying to think, Georgia, I'm trying a couple others, but like, Republicans had all of the senators in those states, like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. And now, Republicans did.
Yeah.
And now Democrats have them. You know what I mean? Like, we are winning. There is danger here, right? There's danger in this anti-democratic, nihilistic, fascist Republican Party that it really has gone off the rails. But Democrats did a great job of messaging in 2020. They did a great job of messaging in 2022. And slowly but surely are doing a good job of clawing back. We are doing a good job of clawing back the country. And enough so that we're winning people are voting for us who actually don't particularly want to vote for Democrats. They would much rather vote for Republicans. They're voting for us because they just can't vote for Republicans. And frankly, we're good enough for them. And that's good enough for me. I don't need everybody to love us. But Democrats have the upper hand here electorally. And McConnell knows it. And that's why you can see it in McConnell's posture, even though he has a hell of a map working for him next year. So a lot of Republicans know it too. And that's why let me just say one last thing, are desperately trying to figure out how to doom and prevent Donald Trump from getting the getting the nomination. And they supposedly have a plan, but I got to tell you, I read a whole piece
Carrie, we'll save that for next week.
Okay, all
because
right.
we are out of time for this week. We'll say that we're gonna have a whole conversation because it actually fits into this conversation as well. What happens when you have a nihilist caucus running the House, Mitch McConnell in the Senate trying to bring back some sanity in governance, and a Republican presidential primary that will reward even higher levels of cruelty? And you're seeing this with DeSantis and Trump really trying to outdo each other and just how horribly cruel they can be. And so this is all going to really undermine McConnell's continued efforts, I think. So this is that conversation for next week because it's a whole episode worth of material. So, Carrie, thank you so
It is.
much for
It is. I am going to slip this in.
slipping in.
There are Republicans trying to doom Trump. They have no plan. Just to be clear, they have no way to do it.
Well, we'll see next week if they've come up with a plan. But right now, it's hope that it's DeSantis is the plan, I think.
Yeah,
So
yes, exactly.
thank you so very much, Gary. Thanks to Walter for producing. Thanks everybody who helps out behind the scenes to make the show happen. Kara, Paul, and Dorothy. And thank you, the viewer, listener, reader, for being part of the Daily Kos community in whatever way you do and fighting for our democracy, because this is a never-ending fight and we have a lot of work to do, but we're doing it. Carrie, we're kind of winning, and we don't want to get overconfident. We don't want to assume anything. We know that it takes a lot of work, but we're doing it. And this is pretty exciting. It's motivating. I like it better than losing. So let's keep doing more of this winning stuff. Thank you all so very much for joining us. Really appreciate and love you all. See you next week.